The story tells that Princess Dea finally turned 17 years old, and this girl was the only daughter of the Emperor of the Freeze Empire. For some reason, the princess was sad and thinking about herself, while a servant disturbed her and told her that it was time to go to the ball. Then Dea remarked that first she would say hello to her father, because he probably wouldn't come to the holiday like last year. Her assistant Katie offered to go to her father with her, but the girl refused, because she wanted to visit the emperor herself. Dea's father's name was Cyril, and he was a man that people feared, calling him the Ice Emperor, and this man had ice magic and was also famous for freezing anyone he didn't like. The emperor also treated his daughter coldly, and his gaze was always icy, even when looking at her, and it is worth confessing that sometimes he even tried to kill her. However, before the start of the ball, our princess still went to her father, although on the way she thought that he did not love her at all. Dea concluded that this ball was arranged by the emperor simply for the sake of propriety, and then she thought about the fact that very soon she would be married off and this would be the last opportunity to see him this year. Our princess really wanted her husband to congratulate her on her birthday at least once, even if not sincerely. But at that moment, the unexpected happened, and soon the birthday girl was pierced by needles of ice. The girl noticed that she was wounded and soon fell down, continuing to bleed. Dying, the young princess saw her father for the last time and wept, because she decided that he hated her so much that he even decided to kill her. And the man, meanwhile, took his daughter in his arms and ordered everything around to freeze, and according to his words, it happened. Our princess died from the evil ice blades of Emperor Cyril, after which the ruler went mad and froze everything around, and this led to the end of one of the worlds. And in our days, one girl already read these events as a story and found it completely hopeless, and even regretted that she bought this book just because of the beautiful cover, and now she was glad that she did not read it in its entirety. Our heroine thought that she had already returned from work tired, and besides, she had to get acquainted with such a strange story. But at the same time, she reminded herself that she had been working in a black office for 3 years, and today was the 31st working day in a row without a day off. So now, tired to death, she decided to escape from reality and plunged into the story of the unfortunate princess. At one point, this girl had read so much that she began to wonder why the emperor ended up crying and destroyed the world altogether, and she wondered if they cried after being killed. And then she thought that maybe after losing her, he realized how much he valued his daughter, and she thought that, in any case, now she was left with an unpleasant sentiment on her soul. And then she decided that she didn't care what the truth of this story was, because she had to go to bed and rest, because she had to go to work again tomorrow. Although she kept coming back to the idea that the plot twist in this book was very strange and even somewhat realistic, considering that that is not the case in life. And this same girl fell asleep, and when she opened her eyes, she decided that she was dreaming, because she was definitely not at home. And someone she did not know was offering her milk, addressing her as a princess and by the name of the one who was in the story she had read. As the reader has already guessed, this girl, tired from work, was reborn into the main character of the book, and now she was a tiny Princess Dea who made some incomprehensible screams. The girl decided to make sure of the realities even more reliably and crawled to the mirror, where she did not recognize herself, while the maid tried to comfort and calm her somehow. Soon the princess received bottles of milk and thought that her tiny body craved such food, so she did not refuse the offered portion. The girl decided that because of her overwork, she was dreaming of various oddities, and she thought to herself why she was called Dea, and remembered that she had heard that name somewhere, and soon she also heard someone coming to her room. And this someone was cold and domineering, and soon the door opened and a strange man looked at her. Although it was the same Emperor Cyril from the same book she had read the day before, and remembered that it was he who was on that beautiful cover. Now this Emperor of the Freeze Empire, and part-time father and tyrant who turns to ice anyone who would try to resist him, stood and looked at her, and it is worth remembering right away that this is the same man who killed her daughter when she turned 17. The girl began to have hysterics, but this is how the story of the Ice Emperor and her, who became Princess Dea, began. His gaze was cold and the child was afraid, because her heart was about to freeze with terror, and he also raised his hand, as if he wanted to kill. Katie protected the child and asked the emperor what he was going to do, and Cyril replied that she should not contradict him, while the little one thought, shouldn't the princess die at 17 years old? The maid gathered courage and declared that she did not know what had happened, but asked the emperor to calm his anger, after which she reminded him that this girl was his only daughter. Our heroine remembered the name of this girl and thought that she was risking her life, so she inexplicably cried and sobbed so that the emperor would not dare to touch innocent people with his freezing. The girl continued to explain herself in her own way, so that the emperor would not think that if he was handsome, then everything was possible for him. And then she declared that his character was disgusting and would spoil his whole life, but of course no one understood her. Cyril listened to the sobs of our heroine, and then declared that he saw that she wanted to tell him something, but her time ran out, so he raised his hand again to freeze and kill the girl. The ice magic began to work, and in the meantime, another servant came into the room and distracted the emperor. Eventually the icicles fell and Cyril ordered everything to be cleaned up here, after which both Katie and Dea were horrified at the fact that they were on the verge of death. Although later the little one thought that he had so much hatred coming from him, but in the end he did not kill her. She even remembered that strange feeling after reading the ending of the original story. A new day dawned, but with it came the realization that the girl had not returned to her world, but was once again greeted by Katie. And then 3 days passed since her reincarnation, and the girl decided that she, Nakano Anna, died in her world from overwork, and now she will have to start a new life in the image of Princess Dea. And if the book is to be believed, then at the age of 17 she will have to die at the hands of Emperor Cyril, and she thought about everything while swallowing another portion of warm milk. The servant girls were moved by how charmingly our heroine smiles, and even feared that some monster might steal her. After that, our girl began to remember if there were any similar creatures in the story from this book. But then Katie, as if learning about her fears, said that the castle is protected by a barrier so no monster can get inside. These words calmed our heroine, but then she thought that she had someone scarier than monsters by her side, and she couldn't help but cry. Soon, Katie introduced our princess to the Freeze Empire, which was ruled by Emperor Cyril, and the girl concluded that it was a very beautiful world, and then thought that after her death it would come to an end. She was glad that she had a memory of the story, though she admitted that she was too tired to remember everything. And she wondered if she could prevent that tragic ending until she fell asleep, and then felt that she was cold, and when she woke up, she saw the emperor standing next to her. He stood silently and looked at her, and the girl did not understand why he had come and even thought that he had decided to kill her again, after which she began to think convulsively what she should do. While he stretched out his hand to her in order, in the opinion of the little one, to do his business, so our heroine made a bet on her cute face and grabbed his hand with her fingers. Soon the princess saw that he shuddered and concluded that her strategy was working and decided that perhaps the previous daughter had cried all the time and was afraid of even his gaze. But now in front of him was a girl who had worked 31 days in the black office without weekend and decided that she had to melt his heart. Finally, our heroine decided to ask for his hand in marriage, but Cyril only smiled at the fact that she could not do anything, because she was completely helpless, and the girl could only cry about it, that in general, she was like a baby. And Dea waited for the moment when he reached out his hands to her to lift her up, but she was afraid that he would suddenly decide to kill her and wanted to call someone for help. But in the meantime he lifted his daughter in his arms and soon kissed her, although the girl waited until the last that he would kill her. And remembered that he looked at her with the desire to kill, but at the same time kissed her, and now the question remained, which of these two images was the real one? Time passed and our princess was already 4 years old, and at that time the girl tried to master reading as much as possible, and in the meantime she read that there is a god of goodness, a Melanchus. Now she knew that there was a good god in this world and people could use magic thanks to the blessing of the spirits from this god. Katie noticed that our heroine was reading a rather difficult book, but the girl replied that she found it interesting. Her assistant was shocked that she was only 4 years old, and she was already so smart, and noted that such books are mastered by children only at the age of 10, and then noted that she began to speak quickly. Katie admired her ward, but most of all she liked the fact that the girl learned to read very early, and the princess had to justify these skills and interest by the fact that reading books is important. Moreover, she needed to acquire a lot of knowledge in order to avoid a bad end for herself in this world. Katie said that science was good, of course, but you also needed to rest, and suggested a walk in the garden, which the girl happily agreed to, especially since she was interested to see if the reeds had bloomed. In the corridor, the princess and her maid met the emperor and the captain of the Knights of the Empire, as well as the chief wizard. Katie immediately wished the important gentleman a blessing from God, and our heroine noticed that her father still had the same cold look and thought that she would not lose to him. Dea called out to her father and thanked him for his work and said that she was going to the garden now and promised that if she found any beautiful flowers, she would bring them to him. The chief magician reminded the emperor that it was time for them to go on business, and the man simply had a desire to freeze everything here, which he said directly, after which he turned and left, saying goodbye to his daughter that she should not dare to go beyond the barrier. Our heroine concluded that she could not understand at all how the emperor's mood changes, and concluded that this meeting was kind of creepy, especially considering the fact that until today she had behaved as befits a beloved daughter, hoping that her daughter's smile would make his kinder. Dea thought again and came to the conclusion that she cannot say that her plan is not working at all and remembered that there are even rumors that he behaves more gently with her. Although Cyril still sometimes became very strict, and the girl decided that she would not be able to escape from a bad end, at the same time remarking that if events changed, then she needed to be careful. Katie regretfully said that the reeds had not bloomed yet, and the girl wondered if the flowers would be white. And then Dea asked the maid if such flowers were black and heard a negative answer, after which Katie added that there are no black flowers at all. And our princess called the maid and asked to look at one flower, which was still black, and Katie immediately asked the girl to move away from this plant. But the action of black magic was activated and dragged our girl to an incomprehensible place, which was not even similar to the outskirts of the castle. In addition to everything, this area was full of scary animals. In particular, she met a wolf with 3 eyes, and she decided that this was a monster from which she needed to run. Only Dea in the next minute tripped and fell, after which she could only ask this monster not to approach her. Our heroine was very frightened and began to beg someone to save her, and the wolf meanwhile decided to attack her, but he did not succeed. At the same moment, the Emperor appeared in the same place and already called the spirit of ice to freeze this evil soul, which he did, and then also broke the frozen monster into small pieces. They immediately confessed to her father that she saw a black warbler in the garden, and when she was near him, she suddenly found herself in this strange place where this wolf appeared and scared her. And Cyril declared that there were no black warblers and explained that it was a monster that pretended to be a flower. Our princess was very surprised at this news. Meanwhile, more monster wolves approached them, to which the Emperor replied that it would be better for them to run away as soon as he arrived. Cyril, on the other hand, used ice magic and froze the predators, at the same time explaining that in this way the monster lured the girl and dragged her into its lair through the distorted space. The girl immediately asked about the protective barrier around the castle and how the monster could bypass it, but the Emperor simply sighed. Dea was impatiently waiting for an answer, mentally explaining to him that she is already 4 years old and she will understand everything, so that he does not tell her. But, without waiting for an answer, she decided that it means monsters can still penetrate through the barrier, after which she felt a cold, moreover, stronger than before. Then the Emperor spoke and said that the weak die, and our princess thought that he had not come to save her at all. Cyril, meanwhile, continued to speak and explain that weak warriors who know little and are powerless die because they fall victim to others, after which he called upon the spirit of ice to get rid of the tainted blood. Our heroine decided that things were going very badly and soon the girl completely fainted, and the Emperor, meanwhile, completely got rid of the rest of the black magic. The father took his daughter in his arms and saw her condition, although he thought that she still did not see what was happening. The girl came to her senses already in her room, surrounded by servants who were eagerly waiting for this hour. They immediately asked what she was doing and was told that the Emperor had returned with her, after which she slept the entire day. Our princess immediately remembered how the Ice Emperor treated her, and now wondered why she was still alive, and then asked to invite Katie to her. Then the girls replied that her assistant could not come to her yet, and Dea decided that she was most likely attacked by monsters. Then the other maids confessed that her assistant was accused of failing to protect our heroine from danger and put in a dungeon. Our princess found this decision unfair, as Katie was definitely not guilty of anything, and asked if her father had given this order and heard the answer in the affirmative, after which she asked that the Emperor be called to her immediately to speak with him. Dea explained that on the contrary, she was protecting her, to which the other servant stated that our heroine is the precious and only heir of this country and it is their duty to protect her. So it is not surprising that the person who did not keep track of her is punished. Our heroine replied that she still did not agree with this decision, despite the fact that they were ready to sacrifice their lives for her, and asked to convey to the Emperor that she wanted to speak with him. The sunset had already come, but the girl was never able to meet the Ice Emperor, and then she found out that since he was distracted to save her, he postponed matters and now solves them. Our heroine was convinced that he wanted to kill her rather than save her, and wondered why he tormented other people so much, and even suggested that maybe this way he thought he would make her suffer more. For a moment, the girl could not stand it and shouted aloud that he was a damn sadist, and the maid began to calm our heroine, adding that not only her assistant was put in prison. The maid admitted that the knights who guarded the garden, as well as the wizards who worked on the security barrier, were also in the dungeon, and added that, according to rumors, they would be released sometime in a month. The girl now apologized for not being able to help the princess and received words of consolation in return. They understood that none of them were to blame and that they simply could not resist the Ice Emperor. Our heroine asked the maids to leave her alone, and she lay down and thought that it was good that these people were not executed at all, and then decided that there was nothing good in all this. The girl became indignant that he, you see, was busy and decided that she herself would go to him. Then she remembered that there were supposed to be guard knights in the corridor, and those guys were unlikely to take her to her father, even if she asked. Then the girl thought that if things were going like this, maybe it would be a good idea to climb down from the window, and began to regret that she did not have magic. Otherwise she would have made herself an ice staircase and would have ended up at the bottom. Dea remembered that magic can be used thanks to the spirits and began to ask these spirits to give her strength, but nothing came of it, although later when she looked out the window, she saw an icy staircase. The girl began to think that maybe something had happened to her after all, and then she decided that in any case this was her chance to slip out of the room. And before she had time to step on the first step, she flew down, not noticing that the stairs quickly disappeared. Soon the spirit of the wind picked her up and held her on its wings to keep the girl from falling, after which she landed on her feet. As our heroine stomped in the direction of her father's office, a boy called out to her and asked if she was all right, after which he immediately knelt down and begged for forgiveness, after which he admitted that for the first time he had lifted something heavier than a cat with the spirit of the wind. Dea, for her part, apologized for being difficult and then thanked him for saving her. The boy immediately concluded that there was a very beautiful girl standing in front of him, and assumed that this was what the spirit of light looked like, and then immediately noted her unusual silver hair color. Then she remembered that only the emperor and the heiress have that color of hair, and began to ask if it was her. But she didn't have time to finish, because our heroine rushed at him to cover his mouth, while a guard passed by and did not notice them. They immediately asked the boy his name and learned that his name is Fei Scrut, and that his grandfather is the main wizard of the empire. Our heroine knew that the Scrut family were representatives of aristocratic officials who specialized in magic, and now she understood why he knew magic at such a young age. They asked Fei what he was doing here and learned that the boy was going to magical training and explained that magical powers are especially enhanced on a moonlit night. The girl asked him if his parents were angry because of his night walks, and learned that they were even very angry, and explained that that is why he goes out secretly to practice. They assumed he was turning invisible, and the alarmed boy asked back how she knew, but the princess chose not to reveal that she hadn't noticed him down there when she looked out the window. And then she simply asked if he could make her invisible too, and heard a positive answer with the addition that it was possible if they didn't hold hands. They asked Fei for help because she desperately needed to see her father. They were soon noticed, and when asked what they were doing there, a blade was presented to Fei's throat. The new character began to ask Fei why he was with the princess, and then our heroine decided to answer herself, stating that he is the grandson of the main wizard, after which she asked to remove the dagger from his throat. Fei asked him a counter question and wondered who he was walking in the middle of the night. The young man introduced himself as Ivan Rogue and then told them that his father was the captain of the 3rd Squad of Imperial Knights, whose name was Oliver Rogue. Our heroine was very surprised at this meeting, and Fei meanwhile turned to the princess and declared that the boy was in no way a knight and that it was very suspicious that he was walking around the castle at such an hour. To which the boy replied that he had brought his father's things and stayed to spend the night in the dormitory, and since he could not sleep, he went out for a walk, but the wizard's grandson still insisted that it was impossible to go out at night. Dea said that Fei wanted to practice magic in secret, and then Ivan asked him if he happened to be living in the wizarding dorm and got an affirmative answer. Then Ivan turned to the princess and said that Fei was lying, because there are dormitories that take a completely different route to the training place, and continued to claim that the boy had lied to Dea. Then Fei admitted that in fact he was very worried about his grandfather, who is now in prison, and wanted to visit him, and the girl was surprised that the main wizard was also arrested, and also because of her. Dea began apologizing to him for the fact that it was her fault after she was kidnapped, and Ivan immediately resented that the barrier turned out to be leaky. A verbal argument began between the boys, and our princess intervened, reminding them that they might be discovered. The princess turned to Fei and told him that if he was worried about his grandfather, it would be easier to go to the emperor and convince him of his innocence, and suggested that they all go to her father together, especially since she was already going to him to ask for the release of all prisoners. Fei supported the idea of our heroine and asked her to take him with her, and even promised to make them invisible. Ivan, in turn, stopped this company and asked them to take him as well. Soon the wizard's grandson, with the help of his magic, led their company to the emperor, and our heroine was worried about whether they really could not be seen and heard, and learned that if they spoke quietly, then they really could not be heard, and Ivan expressed the hope that at least this guy didn't screw up with magic. Fei suggested that he just go if he was afraid, to which Ivan replied that he was more afraid of leaving him alone with the princess, and the girl tried to calm the two of them until they were declassified. Soon, Ivan asked where the emperor was, and the princess assumed that he was in his office, because she knew that he was constantly working. Dea thought that if he didn't show up in the office, they'd go to his bedroom, and Ivan asked if any of them knew where the office was, and Fei asked her to trust him because he knew the information. Our heroine looked around and came to the conclusion that it was somehow creepy here, and thought that it was good that she met these guys. Fei, meanwhile, expressed hope that the monsters would not penetrate the barrier that night, and said that such silence indicates that the wizards are not active. Our heroine asked him to tell in more detail what he knew, and found out that only knights and wizards knew about it, and added that some high-level monsters can pass through the barrier unnoticed, because it is almost impossible to create protection against absolutely all monsters, even despite the fact that wizards tirelessly improve their skills every day. Fei said that the monsters also invent new ways to penetrate the barrier, and it's like an endless race, and then our princess realized where that black flower in the garden came from. Fei asked Dea not to worry because the barrier not only makes these monsters weaker, but also immediately alerts them to their appearance and quickly disposes of them, and explains why the last incident was quite unusual, admitting that even Grandpa didn't notice the intrusion this monster. Ivan, for his part, said that the knights discussed this matter and came to the conclusion that a person could be behind it, and our princess thought that her abduction was not an accident at all. Then our company had to hide from the guard and even get lost, getting into some mysterious places. All the same, they were lucky and they got to the emperor's office, and our princess at that moment was getting excited for some reason. While the boys were deciding how to enter, they heard the emperor's voice announcing that the door was open and they could enter. They immediately apologized for the intrusion, and the emperor asked what she was doing here at such a time. The girl said that she came to talk to him, and at that time she heard a counter question about the person accompanying her. The boys immediately hurried to introduce themselves, but Cyril cut off their speech in an icy tone and declared that he did not allow them to speak, calling everyone by name, which puzzled both young men. The emperor asked his daughter again what she was going to talk to him about that was distracting her from work, and then our princess replied that her assistant and other people were in prison after her kidnapping. Then the girl said that she wanted him to release them immediately because they were innocent. to which the emperor replied that these misfortunes could not protect the heiress of the empire from danger. After which he asked how they could be innocent when they allowed all this. After these words, Cyril asked his daughter directly if any of these boys asked her for mercy. They immediately screamed and said that she met everyone by chance and they helped her. Then the emperor replied that walking at night with the heiress of the empire is an unforgivable act, so he will also put them in prison, after which the girl shouted that he should not dare to do this. The father replied that she did not yet understand what it meant to be an heiress and asked her to remember well what her careless behavior could lead to, adding that for such a crime the whole family was put in prison, and then he said that it was necessary to get rid of even those guards who guarded her room. Our heroine could not stand it and demanded to stop, after which she declared that if she had done something bad, then he should punish her, and the emperor replied that punishing everyone is more effective than punishing her alone. The girl convulsively tried to get an answer to the question of why he was doing this, and then declared that if he hated her, then he should torment only her. And then she couldn't stand it at all and declared that it would be better for him to kill her right in the forest, and these words puzzled even the emperor. And Dea continued to defend her friends and generally said that he, like her father, does not protect her at all, and moreover, attacks and scares her, and at the same time she thought that only his daughter could scold a tyrant like that. Yes, our princess was scared, but if it came to that, she decided to tell him everything and said it all in one sentence, saying that she hated him. Cyril somewhat did not expect such a turn of events, and even froze for a while, and then declared that it would be better if everything froze here. Ivan asked the princess to simply apologize to her father, but the girl replied that she had endured for a long time and could no longer. After that, she said that he should know that she took out all her anger on the people around her, and again emphasized that if he wanted to kill her, then let him focus on her, and the boys could already feel the temperature in the room changing in the lower side. Finally, Cyril declared that those around him were really afraid that he might kill his daughter, and then asked our princess if she thought so too. Then Dea gave an affirmative answer and explained it by the fact that he attacked her, and at the same time she remembered the end of the book she was reading, to which the emperor asked her that if he wanted to kill her, then why is she still alive, and the girl thought to herself that if I knew the answer to this question, I wouldn't worry. The princess suggested in her voice that perhaps he liked to mock her, after which Cyril invited his assistants, who were part-time parents of the young defenders of our princess. The subordinates immediately turned to the emperor and began to apologize for the rudeness of their sons and declare that they were ready to take responsibility for the fact that they were not stopped and again asked for mercy. They assumed that the boys' parents were watching them and wondered why they didn't stop them. Then Faye's mother replied that they had decided to respect her will, and the emperor remarked that they were all interfering with his work and ordered them to leave his office. Ivan was kindly received by his father, who was going to punish him later, and Faye received a reprimand right on the spot and a promise of a serious conversation. But our princess decided to intervene and declared that she was the one who asked them to go with her. After that, she began to apologize to the boys' parents, explaining to them that she could no longer bear that someone was suffering because of her. Then Faye's mother addressed the girl with the words that the emperor does not know how to express his feelings, while at the same time emphasizing that he values her very much. Although our heroine did not believe much in this, even despite the fact that he kissed her once, so she decided that he attacked her much more often. The woman then said that if he didn't value her, he would have frozen her as soon as she entered his office. The boy's mother also emphasized that it was already late and offered to take her to her room. After such a busy evening, our princess couldn't sleep at all and decided to read a book about the first prince of the Freeze Kingdom, who was Cyril. Dea learned that when the prince was 10 years old, assassins from a neighboring kingdom killed his parents. Prince Cyril then took command of the army and attacked the enemy kingdom and won a brilliant victory, thus joining Alborn to Freeze and creating an empire. The story showed that 5 years after these events, the kingdom of Manhwa, which is the neighbor of the former Alborn, declared war on the Freeze Empire. And in this battle, the imperial knights and wizards brilliantly repelled the attacks, being accompanied by Cyril, and Manhwa also joined his empire. Dea read that many were outraged by the young emperor's policies, but Cyril simply froze all the disgruntled detractors, and after that it became known to everyone that Emperor Cyril was cruel and inhuman. Our princess began to think about her father's question about whether she really thought he wanted to kill her, and then she remembered what Faye's mother had said about her father's appreciation of her, and many questions filled her mind, to which there were no answers. The girl suddenly thought that the princess from the book was not killed by the emperor, who loved her so much that after losing his daughter, he wanted to destroy the whole world and did it. Our princess concluded that this would be the logical explanation for him not having killed her yet, although at the same time she didn't understand why he was attacking her. When Dea opened her eyes, she found Katie in her room, who immediately greeted her mistress. And our princess did not hold back and immediately rushed to hug her, not believing that her assistant was in front of her, and asked if she had been released from prison. Katie confirmed that it was her and that it was not a dream, and added that this morning the emperor had released everyone who was responsible for the incident with the black flower. And now our heroine did not believe that her father had granted her request, although she was very happy about it and decided that he should be thanked for this during the meeting. Dea was very happy that now she and her assistant were together again. Katie was silent for a while, and then knelt before the girl and said that she was very sorry that this happened. Then the princess explained that she was not guilty of anything, and in response she herself apologized for the fact that she went to prison because of her and promised that she would be more careful from now on. Katie admitted that her little lady is very kind and said that she remembers Miss Layla at times like this. The girl assumed it was about her mother, and Katie, meanwhile, said she had one request for Dea. Then the assistant asked the princess to release her from the duty of taking care of her. Katie, with all due respect, admitted that she would not be able to adequately protect her, although she once swore to Miss Layla that she would protect her at all costs, but as the circumstances showed, she could not. Our princess concluded that her assistant was a very good girl, and from the original story she knew that Katie was from a family of merchants and was an ordinary worker in the castle, but when the empress noticed her, she took her into her service. After some time, the mother of our princess helped her to find a match among the aristocrats and get married, overcoming the gulf in origin, so the girl left the castle. But a year later, her husband died, and she again came to serve in the palace, and only thanks to the empress, the girl was able to recover from her grief. Since Katie truly loved and respected Empress Layla, when the woman died during childbirth, the devoted widow replaced the princess's mother and surrounded the child with love. They understood that her life after reincarnation was so peaceful thanks to Katie, and remembered how this girl gently held her in her arms and always took care of her. Such attention on her part gave our princess strength and courage not to be afraid of the emperor. Of course, the girl did not want to let go of her assistant and asked her not to go because she wanted to be with her forever. And then our heroine said that if she still finds it difficult to be around her, then she can leave her, because it is much more important for her that her assistant smiles, and then the woman couldn't help but cry. Then Katie admitted that she didn't really want to leave her either, but she was just afraid that something like this and terrible would happen again and she wouldn't be able to help. So then our princess replied that she would learn to be more careful and become stronger so as not to upset her. They again asked the girl if she would stay with her, and then Katie gave an affirmative answer and added that she also wants to become stronger to protect her. In the end, the perpetrators of this conversation decided that they would try to do this together, and afterwards they hugged to confirm their decision to always be there for each other and to be strong, even though they each had tears in their eyes. Katie asked the princess for permission to serve her until her last breath, and the girl was glad to have such a loyal assistant by her side. Our heroine went to the emperor again, and when he coldly asked what she needed this time, the girl replied that she came just to thank him. The princess explained that she was very glad that he had released Katie and the rest of the prisoners involved in her case, and Cyril responded by asking his daughter if she understood now why he did not kill her. The girl thought that maybe he cherished her, but she did not dare to say it out loud. The emperor waited for an answer, and our heroine changed the subject of the conversation, but the man declared that if this was all she could say, then she would go and not disturb him. Dea stated that she had one more request and asked if she could also learn magic. Then the emperor replied that it was too early for her to do this, and in return heard as an argument that Faye, despite her age, knew how to do it and learn it. And then the father replied to his daughter that she was not a sorceress, but an heiress, who without there is something to do. Cyril once again tried to explain to his daughter that she should finally realize that she is a princess, and our heroine, in principle, was waiting for something similar, but still she was sorry that she did not get anything in return. Dea announced to her father that in this case she wants to at least make friends, because with them she will be able to learn a lot of information, and her father, after thinking for a while, gave his permission for this. The emperor said that he would prepare a room for her to play with her friends, and the girl decided to thank him with a hug, although her father apparently decided not to reciprocate. Finally, our princess had girlfriends, but it was far from what she imagined, if compared to what she meant by the phrase, to make friends. When the girl said goodbye to her friends, the emperor concluded that his daughter did not like these meetings, so he asked her about it. Then our heroine admitted that she would like to play with Faye and Ivan, and then the father realized that his daughter liked these boys. He began to think about it, and the princess did not understand what was happening to his face, and assumed that his answer would be negative, which was to be expected. Dea asked again if it was really not allowed to play with them, and the emperor sternly replied that it was not possible, although it was very easy for the girl to communicate with these boys. The father concluded that his daughter was very persistent, and our heroine, meanwhile, continued to insist on meeting boys, at least not for long. And what could be said when those eyes could melt even the icy heart of the emperor, and in the end he already thought about it, and in a few minutes he allowed it to happen, but he warned that it would not be for long. Even Katie was surprised that the strict emperor allowed his daughter to be friends with boys, and thought that maybe the ruler became different because of this girl. Meanwhile, our heroine couldn't wait to meet the boys and was already thinking about what she would do with them and what they would talk about. This long-awaited day finally arrived, and it was somewhat different from the ideas of our young lady, because the emperor sat at the head of the room lined with toys and finally allowed the children to play. Cyril announced to the boys that his daughter wanted to play with them, and when they seemed petrified, he began to ask why they were sitting and not playing. And the daughter looked at her father and wondered how it is possible to play in such an environment, when his icy gaze examines their every step and word. Dea asked her father if he wanted to go home and do his work, to which she received the answer that he was interested in watching how they would spend time together. Our princess decided to state directly that they cannot play in his presence because they feel under his strict supervision. Cyril immediately asked his daughters if they were going to play something that adults can't see, and the girl immediately gave a negative answer and explained that his presence just scares her friends. At that moment a knight entered the room and told the emperor that there was trouble again on the border of the Manhwa region, and the girl decided that this was their chance to be alone and immediately told her father that it was time for him to go and deal with things and they were just going to play together. Then the emperor ordered Katie not to take his eyes off them and left himself, after which the boys sighed with relief, and our heroine immediately apologized for this situation and explained that Dad was not in the best mood today. The boys immediately began to express their surprise at the fact that the princess herself invited them to play with her. Then Dea admitted that it was easy for her to communicate with them even at the first meeting, and she wanted them to teach her everything they knew. And Ivan immediately assumed that, apparently, our heroine was too smart for her years and did not get along with by their peers in their interests. Ivan also noted that he had a younger brother and a younger sister, but they were still children compared to the princess. Then Faye stated that you shouldn't compare Lady Dea to her relatives. A quarrel arose between the boys, and our heroine decided to interrupt this verbal altercation with the desire to learn something new about wizards and knights. And then Faye immediately declared that he could tell her everything he knew about wizards, and immediately reminded that their interlocutor was not as in the knightly order. Ivan laughed and, in his turn, stated that all the men of the rogue family had served in the knightly order for generations and became knights of the highest rank, and asked in return if he could tell anything about magic at all. Then Faye took the floor and said that mostly wizards deal with monsters and protect the castle first, but sometimes they go to destroy monsters in different parts of the empire, and in their spare time they do barrier work and create magical artifacts and all that kind of thing. Ivan immediately said that the knights, in turn, solve problems related to people, such as catching criminals and defeating robbers, and our heroine then asked if the knights had magic. The princess learned that the captain of the knights had magical powers, but most of the knights did not know how to use this art, and added that his father was among those who did not. At the same time, Ivan noted that his father's sword is enchanted with a special spell and therefore he can fight even with magicians. The boy admitted that some people say that wizards are stronger than knights, but he does not think so, and declared that when he becomes a knight, he will prove that knights are much more useful than wizards. But Faye did not agree and immediately declared that wizards are much stronger than knights, and a verbal spat broke out between them again. Everyone immediately expressed their dissatisfaction with each other and began to belittle each other's abilities, and our heroine again asked the boys not to quarrel. The girl really liked chatting with these boys and asked her father to arrange a similar meeting again, after which the Ice Emperor allowed her to see Faye and Ivan once a week, and on the 5th time they were even allowed to walk around the castle accompanied by a guard. Our young team followed the knights and thought about where they would go today, and decided that the best idea would be to keep the path to the garden and play there. Our heroine immediately remembered the previous story that happened to her, and thought that in any case there would be 2 guards with them today, so they should not come across a strange flower like the one last time. The boys again had a fight among themselves, and our princess declared that she liked to watch their conversations and did not want to leave any of them. Meanwhile, the guard noticed that something was strange in the garden. Soon the knights already fought with the terrible monster, but all were defeated. This monster soon took the form of a man, who turned to our heroine and asked her to give him her delicious blood, while another guard pulled up. The monster declared that there were too many troublemakers and called upon his power, after which our heroine saw the same black reed flower again, after which the princess disappeared again, but this time she was in the company of Ivan and Faye. The boy immediately asked her if everything was okay, and Dea, meanwhile, wanted to know where they were, and then Ivan assumed that they must be in an old temple. Faye finally came to his senses, because he was lulled, and declared that it seems they were moved here on purpose and called these actions were built by a crude formula. Ivan, in turn, told everyone to gather and prepare, because soon their enemy would be here. He was right, and the next minute the monster appeared, curiously declaring that the Ice Emperor's daughter stood before him in person. He again asked the girl for her blood and her magic and reached out to our heroine. But Ivan began to defend our heroine and fight back, after which he was repulsed. After an unsuccessful attempt by Ivan, Faye took up the task and began to call on the spirit of the wind to tear the dark vine and break its thorns, but his efforts were too weak, which the monster recognized. Dea saw that the boys had already been neutralized, and understood that at this rate he would soon reach her, after which he would kill them all. Meanwhile, he approached our heroine, and then the girl asked him why he needed her. The monster replied that the flesh and blood of a young maiden imbued with powerful magical power was the best delicacy for him, and our heroine at the same time noticed that he looked like a man, but he was not. Dea came to the conclusion that only her father could defeat him and began to call her father for help. And the emperor came, after which he turned to his daughter and replied that he had already fulfilled her request several times. At the same time, he noted that he did not allow her to leave the castle, and she, meanwhile, was happy that he came to her aid and saved her, and decided to postpone the showdown for later. The girl saw that magicians and knights came with her father, who immediately surrounded the monster and also began to help her friends. Cyril immediately noticed that the monster's cloak belonged to the rebels from Legzarin, and while they were talking, the head wizard Liburn went to protect the breaches in the barrier. The emperor asked the wizard not to interfere and for everyone to leave, and he himself called on the spirit of ice, but the monster replied that it was useless, because it would absorb all the magical power of the barrier, and then deprive the emperor of his strength, dry him up and eat him, and finally feast on his daughter. Cyril did not share the plans of this monster and declared that he was not full of intelligence at all, and offered him his power if he so desired it. Soon the monster's body was bound in ice, and the emperor asked him why he was delaying if he wanted to take away his powers, but the monster froze completely. And now all the knights again saw that their ice emperor was the most powerful, and gave him due honor, and Cyril ordered that this ice be taken to prison and all the truth should be beaten out of him. Our heroine could not believe all that she saw, and when her father asked the girl what was wrong with her face, she threw herself into his arms and through tears confessed that she was very scared. The emperor hugged his daughter in return and asked her not to cry, and she thought to herself that she had no idea that she could be so warm in his arms. When Cyril turned to the boys, our heroine immediately started talking about how they tried their best to protect her, after which the emperor replied that it didn't matter how hard they tried, because he was miraculously able to feel the rise of magical power when she called him. The emperor explained that if this had not happened, all three of them would have died by now. Cyril reminded again that the weak die and the weak protect no one. When our heroine returned to her room, Katie couldn't be happier that the girl was alive and well, and she admitted that her father had saved her. They asked the emperor why the man-monster said that she had delicious blood, and then she admitted that she knew that monsters could enter the castle and asked if they had attacked her before. The girl decided to clarify whether he was attacking her to protect her from the monsters that were getting to her, but the emperor simply remained silent, as he had done many times before. Already leaving, he replied that she would then be constantly afraid of an invisible threat and tired of it, and our heroine understood that the emperor was simply silently destroying monsters and in this way showed his kindness to her. Katie said that she did not see the monsters and did not even guess about the emperor's intentions, so she behaved very rudely. They replied that she behaved similarly and stated that if her father had explained everything at once, then she would not have been afraid of him, but she herself thought that because of her father's silence. The princess from the original story died without ever knowing the truth, because she had no idea that the cold and icy emperor actually loved and cherished her very much. Meanwhile, the emperor went to the prison to interrogate the man-monster, where his assistants had already gathered. Cyril stood in front of the monster and asked him what he should do with the scoundrel who wanted to eat his daughter. And he himself listened as the chief wizard said that it was this monster who kidnapped the princess with the help of a black flower. The mage also explained that his soul was already conquered by the monsters that inhabited his body and possessed him. The monster again demanded that he be given the Ice Emperor's daughter, and Cyril was already tired of this monster's chatter. He assumed that he had gotten into the castle using some kind of clever trick, noting that he clearly hadn't come up with it. The emperor began to question who had suggested this to him, and he finally said the name and it was unexpected and sounded like Garjo, after which the head wizard immediately asked everyone to leave, as he noticed the transformation in this monster. Liburn concluded that he had most likely been charmed so that he would suffer by saying the name of the culprit, and the emperor concluded for himself that it was a black and thick magical power belonging to an evil god. Cyril knew that sooner or later he would start hunting him and his daughter and asked to call King Legzarin to meet him. Soon this meeting took place and Cyril immediately noticed that the king must have been surprised by the sudden invitation from the Freeze Kingdom, but the king said that he saw nothing wrong with it. The knight commander thought that Legzarin was an independent state from their empire, and that this king was much older than their emperor and had reigned longer, but their emperor had a much more convincing appearance. And he even smiled, admitting at that time that his master was invincible and did not notice that at the same time he began to smile involuntarily from his thoughts. The king decided to get down to business, and at once inquired why he had been called, and then a stranger, who was in this cloak, entered their castle, and at the same time showed a mark which had been stamped on the cloth. The king was immediately startled, while the emperor declared that it was a wizard from his kingdom who had invaded his castle, and, together with the monsters, tried to harm his daughter and asked if he could consider these actions a declaration of war on the part of his kingdom. The man immediately became indignant that he had absolutely no idea what kind of war he was talking about and declared that they had never been in a conspiracy with monsters. Cyril asked for proof and then the king admitted that their kingdom was currently suffering from an influx of monsters, while at the same time emphasizing that they despised these monsters and would never ally with them. The emperor then explained that in any case, somehow the monster was able to take over his wizard's body. The king immediately offered his sincere apologies for the fact that the problems of his country had caused trouble for the heiress of the empire. Cyril asked King Legzarin directly if he was related to Garjal, and the man immediately asked how the emperor knew the name. But the emperor in response asked the king to begin by telling what he knew. The head captain of the knights walked out the door and met the third rogue captain, who immediately inquired as to the progress of the conversation. The man replied that Legzarin was not involved in the recent events, and in the meantime shared the news that they had managed to learn something interesting. As it turns out, the evil god Gargil is sealed in this kingdom, and they did it 500 years ago, but recently the monsters have revived, and now there is an assumption that the seal that bound him all this time has weakened. The captain noted that the seal itself still works, but this god can influence monsters in the entire district, and he also hunted the princess, but the emperor pressed the king, and now Legzarin will take care of strengthening the seal. And then the commanders started talking about the fact that they also need to strengthen the defense, after which they switched to talking about Ivan. The boy's father said that as soon as he returned home, he was practicing with the ball all the time because he really wanted to become a knight as soon as possible. Then the chief captain said that his father could bring the boy to the castle for training, and he would personally take care of his training. 2 weeks have passed since the day of our emperor's conversation with King Legzarin, and after that peace reigned in the castle. One day already late at night, Katie asked our heroine to go to bed to rest and, in case of anything, to always call her. The girl obeyed her assistant and lay down, although her thoughts returned again and again to the day when that unpleasant event happened. She also noticed that her friends stopped coming to her because they were too busy with their studies and refused to meet themselves. They understood, but she was worried that they were upset about what had happened, and thought that if Faye was a wizard, she would probably be able to see him. But then she stopped herself, thinking that it wouldn't be good to run out of the room a second time, although she really wanted to see them. Suddenly, the girl heard her father's voice behind her, who asked what she was doing at the window, and the princess answered that she simply did not sleep. But the emperor, of course, did not believe her, and was sure that his daughter was going to run away again. Despite the fact that she knew that he would not kill her, she was still afraid. They immediately hastened to say that she was not going to disappear, she was just thinking about herself. The emperor stared at her and waited for the truth, and then the princess admitted that her thoughts were on Faye and Ivan, whom she wanted to see. Cyril asked his daughter why they were so interested in her, and the girl admitted that the boys looked upset, and then he took her in his arms and carried her to bed. Despite the fact that the man rudely threw her on the bed, then began stroking her head and asked her to rest. Cyril promised his daughter that she would meet with them tomorrow, and he himself thought that this was the best decision, otherwise she would run away from the room again at night. He stroked her and tried to put her to sleep, although she had difficulty falling asleep because she was not used to such attention. The next day, the father kept his word and took our heroine to the knight's training place. Dea was very surprised when she learned that Ivan had become a knight, and then she learned that the moment had not yet come, but the boy was very liked by Commander Kane, who took up his training. When the men noticed the princess, they immediately paid their respects to her, and the commander-in-chief asked the emperor why they were walking without protection. And then Cyril declared that he did not need protection and simply brought his daughter to show how her friend was doing. Ivan, meanwhile, talked to our heroine and asked how she was doing. Of course, the girl was glad to see her friend and immediately explained that everything was fine with her. And the guy immediately apologized for refusing her a meeting and said that he had been training all this time. Ivan admitted that he did this in order to protect her from the attack of monsters in the future, as well as to become stronger. At this time, Kane turned to his subordinate and asked the boy what liberties he allowed himself in the presence of the emperor and asked if he had fallen in love. Poor Ivan immediately began to make excuses and explain that his sister and the princess are of the same age and he perceives her as his own. And then he added that he wanted to protect her, but the commander, of course, did not believe him and reacted with mockery to his refusal. And the emperor was interested in his speech about his sister, and he clarified whether the boy really treats the heiress as his sister. Ivan immediately began apologizing and heard the emperor's request to continue training in the future, but at the same time reminded that Dea was sad without him and asked him to come to her sometimes to play together. The boy immediately understood and accepted the emperor's order, after which he offered our heroine to play together somehow. When the daughter and father were returning to the castle, the girl noticed a strange place and asked the emperor about it and heard that it was a wizard's laboratory. Soon, the girl noticed her second friend, who was engaged in magical exercises with her mother. Our heroine immediately turned to the boy and said that they had not seen each other for a long time and she was wondering how he was doing. After that, Faye apologized for denying her a meeting and explained that he decided to study magic harder. The boy emphasized that he wants to become the best wizard of the empire and protect the country and her personally. The emperor questioned if he really wanted to become the best wizard in the empire and asked him if he could surpass his grandfather and even him in his skills. Faye, after thinking it over, replied that one day he would get over it, whereupon the emperor asked that he set aside time to see his daughter at least once a week, noting that he should not become such a petty person who felt sorry for himself. Time for a princess. Faye immediately turned to our heroine and declared that he would no longer refuse her meetings. After that, he offered the girl to be friends and seal their agreement with a handshake. The emperor and his daughter were returning home, and the girl thought that these two boys were very cool. After that, our heroine turned to Cyril and thanked him for allowing her to meet her friends. And she was also very pleased that he asked the boys to play with her again. The emperor looked around and asked his daughter if he was still in her eyes a terrible person who wanted to kill her, and then the girl immediately gave a negative answer and took his hand. She explained that he is emotionless and clumsy, and sometimes even cold, but at the same time the one who loves her. And among other things, she thought that if Princess Dea were not her, then this girl would never have guessed about his love in her life. Our heroine wanted to ask this man if he could at least sometimes make his face simpler, and she concluded that it is not easy to be the daughter of the Ice Emperor. Our heroine was resting and she had dreams from her past life where men hurt her and women were jealous, trying to harm her. She awoke with terrors, but soon Katie came into the room and said hello and immediately asked why the girl was up so early. Then the princess replied that today she had to get up earlier, although it was immediately clear to Katie that she wanted to better prepare for the ball, and said so. Dea decided to let her assistant think so and even joked about it. But Katie then knelt before her mistress and congratulated her on her 10th birthday. And yes, our heroine has lived for 10 years since she was reborn as a princess. This was followed by the official celebration of this day, where aristocrats and guests welcomed our heroine and wished prosperity to the Frese Empire. While all these formalities were taking place, the girl thought about the fact that there was neither an angry boss nor girls with a bad character and concluded that she did not act like the heroine of the original book and learned that the Ice Emperor actually loves his daughter. And now our heroine wondered who killed the princess in the original story, who was the impetus. She also mentioned that the original emperor never attended his daughter's birthday celebrations. And the girl, in connection with this, every time thought about the fact that once she deviated from the original path of the plot, what would happen to her next? And a little later she was called by the main wizard with his grandson, who also came to this holiday. Libran addressed the princess saying that she had grown up to be a charming girl and expressed his desire to see her grow up, while Faye, for her part, emphasized that she looked great. Our heroine was very pleased by the attention of her friend and she complimented him back, after which Faye even blushed. Soon Ivan came up with his father and also honored the princess with their attention and said words of congratulations. Ivan also noticed Faye's presence, so he said hello and started laughing at him. After that, a verbal altercation broke out between them again, with a simultaneous battle of looks, which was no longer a novelty for our heroine. The girls present immediately began to admire her friends and talk about how these boys had become very popular, and continued to whisper about Faye, who was called a brilliant young wizard, and about Ivan, who had the distinction of being the youngest knight in the order. Meanwhile, while the girls admired these handsome men, the emperor approached his daughter and said that he would leave for a while to say hello and talk to someone. Cyril turned to the boys and asked them to take care of the princess in his absence. Faye immediately volunteered to accompany the princess, and Ivan, who was late, began to resent. But Faye asked him to go for a walk, as he could quite handle it alone, but he didn't think of backing down. At the time, while our heroine was trying to calm her friends and explain that the emperor's order was given to two, one girl passed by them, who was mentally indignant at what was happening, referring to the special attention that the princesses were paying. And when at last the boys had quieted down, Lady Marian greeted each of them. The girl turned to our heroine and asked permission to congratulate her, although the princess had no idea who she was, but still accepted her greetings. Marian immediately said that being at a party surrounded by two boys might lead to rumors that the heiress likes to go out with men, and did not express her concern about the matter sincerely. The girl continued to inflame the situation in terms of the fact that they would say about our princess, that she is, for example, promiscuous, and the emperor, albeit from afar, watched all this. And then Marian directly asked if it is possible that our heroine is really promiscuous. Thea could not understand what was wrong with her interlocutor, and she continued to say what a disaster it would be if strange rumors about the heiress began to spread. Our heroine replied that she has been friends with these boys since childhood and is on good terms with them, after which she heard that it is a vice to spend time with boys at such a young age. The princess looked at her interlocutor and thought how she was not afraid to speak so harshly towards the heiress, trying to understand what kind of person she was, thoughtless or, on the contrary, brave. And at that moment Faye spoke and told Lady Marian to watch her words, for her speech was obscene. Ivan stood up for this Marian and asked Faye to be nicer to her. It is hardly worth noting that the boy was an acquaintance of this girl. To which Faye replied that he is nice to her anyway, while she is brutal towards Lady Dea and he protects her. In her defense, the vile girl replied that she just wanted to warn the heiress against a bad reputation. And our heroine came to the conclusion that Marian definitely likes Ivan, so she is jealous. The emperor heard that the fights were going on around the young company, and he began to pay more and more attention to what was happening. Our princess understood that if her father approached now, he would immediately freeze this girl, and on the spot. Dea decided to save the situation and offered Ivan to dance with Marian, and despite the fact that the young knight reminded that he should take care of her, the princess insisted. Marian knew no bounds to her joy when the young knight she liked asked her to dance. Meanwhile, our heroine tried to find out from Faye who this person is and learned that she is the granddaughter of Mr. Marco Edgar, who is a member of the Council of Elders. The young magician asked the princess if she had sometimes kept her away from him on purpose so that the emperor would not see it, and when he heard a positive answer, he assumed that she had done it in vain, because, in his opinion, it would not be bad if the emperor was aware of the situation. Then Dea explained that he would freeze the girl at her feast and spoil the impression of himself even more. Faye began to admire the fact that the princess took care of such a matter, and emphasized that she was already thinking like an adult. And our heroine thought that as long as these two were dancing, she had nothing to worry about. Faye decided not to waste time or opportunity and immediately invited the princess to dance with him. When the girl replied that she was not doing it well at all, then the young man asked to rely on him and called on the spirit of the wind, which helped our heroine to move easily. The princess admired the fact that magic was capable of such a thing, and the boy was pleased to see her joy. The grandfather noticed that his grandson was helping the heiress to dance with wind magic, and the woman remarked that it was wonderful and emphasized that his grandson was a brilliant magician. The woman even drew attention to the fact that the boy and the girl looked very nice in a pair and suit each other. Marion, meanwhile, kept Ivan by her side in every possible way. Then she asked directly if he loved our princess, to which the young man gave a negative answer, and Ivan explained that he valued her as a younger sister. And then he admitted that the emperor once got angry about the fact that he treated her exactly like a sister. Finally, the sunset time ended and the father took his daughter to him, and on the way he noticed that she was completely tired and noticed that she was even more than last time. Our heroine assumed that maybe she was tired of Marion's guilt, and she, meanwhile, suddenly called her and began to catch up. Dea did not understand why she came to her, and then the girl said that she wanted to apologize for her rudeness. Our heroine was afraid that her interlocutor would now meet a cold end, but then the girl held out the box and said that it was a gift from her. She mentioned that she really wanted to give it to him in person, so she caught up with her to do it. Marion then leaned over to the princess and confessed that she had written a letter too, but was ashamed that anyone would see it and asked her to read her lines in her room when she was alone. Then she once again thanked for the holiday and hurriedly retired with a wish of good night. The emperor immediately asked his daughter what had happened on the holiday, and the girl said that everything was fine and added that she just wanted to sleep. Our heroine saw that everything was almost on the verge of freezing, but miraculously it passed. Then she thought that maybe Marion was actually a good person, while she, the same Marion, was spying on the emperor and his daughter with a wicked smile. Katie was preparing our heroine for bed and saw how tired the girl was, and suggested that she take a bath tomorrow morning, and the princess agreed. After which the assistant asked when she would open the gift and heard that her charge was still determined to look into package and then go to bed. The two of them wondered what was inside, and when Dea removed the lid, a butterfly flew out of it, but it was kind of strange. Meanwhile, both the emperor and the guard responded to the princess' screams and ran to her chambers. Katie immediately told the emperor that a bug flew out of the box, and the girl corrected the assistant and explained that it was a butterfly and she was scared. One of the knights soon discovered a living creature and declared that he would catch it, but he did not have time because the emperor froze it. Now our heroine was calm and thanked her father that he did not think for a second and immediately dealt with the butterfly that scared her. When everyone left, Katie asked her ward why she didn't tell her father the whole truth. The princess then explained that if her father found out that this butterfly had flown out of the box, he would immediately freeze Marion, as well as the butterfly, so she decided to think that it was just childish pranks and asked the assistant not to tell her father all the details. Katie accepted the request of her ward and thought that the princess is still a child, but already so kind, and our heroine thought that if a centipede was inside, she would have died from fright. On the other hand, Dea understood that if the emperor found out about all this, then Marion's grandfather would immediately be dismissed from the council, and in the worst case, her entire family would be executed, and she was still a child and had no idea that she could call such a thing trouble for yourself and your relatives. The next day, our heroine was extremely inattentive in class and constantly thinking about herself, and the teacher assumed that her student was very tired after the ball, so she decided to finish the lessons for today. Dea apologized for her behavior, but at the same time agreed with the teacher and went to drink tea. At that moment, a maid came and told that our heroine had received a letter from the same Lady Marion. The girl decided to see what was written there, and she was already mentally trying to understand what this person had invented this time. The letter said that she was glad to meet our heroine and expressed a desire to become friends. Marion also asked the princess if she liked the butterfly decoration and said that she adored these creatures, and even Katie thought that maybe the live butterfly was a misunderstanding. But our heroine did not know how to react to all this. Besides, since then letters and gifts from this person began to come to her every day. One day a gift toy in the form of a cat arrived and the princess found it cute and began to examine it. Finally, Dea's heart was inclined to the fact that maybe the butterfly really wasn't evil, and Marion really wanted to befriend her, or she had changed her mind and now wants to apologize in this way. While our heroine was holding the toy in her hands, she was injured, but she did not betray the assistant and asked to put the cat on the shelf. Meanwhile, she tried to figure out what this little girl was up to when she hid the needle in the toys, and decided that it was enough to endure all this. The princess went with this question to her father and stated that Marian often sends her gifts, to which the emperor replied that she had also sent him a letter asking that she wanted to be friends with the princess. Cyril asked his daughter's opinion on this issue, and then Dea said that she was not against having a tea party with her, but she reasoned that if she really wanted to be friends with her, she would see how it was. 5 days later, the day of the tea party came and this treacherous person rushed to visit. The servant noticed that the guest was in a very happy mood and noted this, to which she heard that she had been waiting for this meeting for a long time, so she was happy. Our heroine soon came and greeted Marian, and she, saying that she missed the princess very much, rushed to hug her. Then she began to apologize for her frivolous act and explained that she was really looking forward to their meeting. Our princess looked at this performance and replied that she was also very much looking forward to this day. It should be recalled that this Marian was rude to our heroine on her birthday, and then also sent outrageous gifts. Today, the princess decided to invite her to a tea party, and when they were walking in the garden, Dea said that she had invited not only her. 2 friends of our heroine have already met the princess and thanked her for the invitation to the tea party. Marian was immediately confused when she saw Ivan, and the young knight expressed his hope that they would have a good time over tea together. Our heroine immediately saw how this person had changed, especially in the face, and decided that if this girl does something of her kind today, she will burn her right in front of her beloved Ivan. Meanwhile, the guest declared that she chose blue tea for our heroine and did it on purpose, to which the princess asked what the name of this drink was. Marian did not answer directly, but began to simply praise this tea, and our heroine realized that this girl was again making some insidious plans. And then she still stated that the raw materials for this tea are collected in the region of the Manhwa kingdom, and it is called Tears of the Moonlit Night. Ivan praised her knowledge of the tea business, and then Marian remarked that the daughter of an aristocrat should know this, trying to emphasize that the heir to the empire did not have such information unlike her. Ivan commented that the tea was sweet, and then Marian suggested that he try another type of tea if he liked a more tart version. She immediately began to say that the drink was made from the leaves of a plant that grows in the Galora region, then added that the drink had a slightly bitter, peculiar taste and noted that grown men liked it. Marian even expressed regret that if she had known that the object of her adoration would come, she would have brought him with her. Then our heroine said that she wanted to surprise her and assumed that she would be happy with such a company, but the guest sharply declared that she absolutely hates surprises. Dea, watching her reaction, wondered, among other things, which of them was the princess, and she suggested to talk about a more pleasant topic. Marian asked the princess if she knew the novel Rose of the Night Dew and added that this book was popular among aristocrats, but our heroine replied that she was not familiar with this work. Then the girl decided to discuss a fashionable picture painted by the famous Gough, and our heroine, meanwhile, thought that she only knew one famous person who painted such a picture and his name was Van Gogh, but remained silent. Then Marian remarked that the heiress, as she could see, was completely ignorant of anything, to which the princess replied that she already had a lot to learn, so she didn't have enough time for these little things. The princess said that you can finish your studies quickly and then do something useful, and she asked her if she even knows how many hours she spends studying. Our heroine has decided that she has had enough and now she will tell her everything. But at that moment Marian was approached by Faye and explained that Lady Dea is an heiress and she is studying hard. When the young wizard declared that our heroine was much more busy than an ordinary noble lady, Marian finally showed herself and declared that she didn't care. Even Ivan intervened in the conversation and also defended the princess, and noted that she reads books more difficult than such a novel. And even if she does not know about fashion, she knows foreign languages, and said that, in his opinion, this is amazing. Dea was very pleased that the boy stood up for her when she didn't even have time to open her mouth. And the princess thanked her friends, which, of course, Marian did not like. She stood up and asked our heroine to retire in order to have a private conversation with her. And, despite the fact that the boys were worried about this, our princess still went to the fountain and soon heard from Marian that she was well under the protection of her pets. The girl asked the princess if she had specially called her to show how close she was to these young people, and emphasized that it was a bad thing of her to do so. They understood that Marian went straight and asked her not to talk to her in such a way, and she replied that it was mean to take advantage of her position and try to win over Mr. Ivan. She went on to say that if our princess wasn't the heir, then the young knight wouldn't have responded to her invitation, and then Dea stopped her flow of words. The princess directly asked Marian if she loves Ivan and if she is acting like this out of jealousy. Dea told her that Ivan will not love her as she is now. The princess said that her friend was an honest man and that he would not like a girl who made a fool of herself, and because he was kind, he would hold back and not tell her about it directly. At the same time, our heroine declared that he sees everything, and then Marian, with all her anger and strength, pushed the princess into the water of the fountain. Faye and Ivan heard the noise and guessed that it was coming from the direction the princess had gone with Marian. Everyone immediately rushed to them and began to wonder what had happened and why the princess was in the water. When the boys looked questioningly at Marian, she replied that she herself would like to know what happened. The girl said that the princess herself suddenly jumped into the fountain and it was strange even for her, and Faye helped our heroine to get up. Soon the emperor came up to them and immediately declared that he saw that they were having fun and said that he knew that there was a tea party today, after which Cyril sternly asked what they had forgotten at the fountain when they should have been sitting at the table. The emperor surveyed everyone present with his cold gaze and waited for an answer. He then looked at Marian and asked her if she had done this to his daughter. The girl immediately exclaimed that of course not and added that the heiress jumped there herself, and then the emperor asked his daughter if her words were true. Our heroine thought about the fact that if she tells the truth, her father will immediately kill her. Dea pondered over what she should do, and Marian, meanwhile, burst into tears. This lying person tried to press pity with her tears, and declared that she had done nothing, and the princess wanted to blame her, and added, looking into our heroine's eyes, that it was terrible and vile to do so. Dea was shocked that while she was worried that she would be executed, this girl decided to make her guilty. Marian saw that the situation was escalating, turned to the object of her adoration with the question of whether he believed her, and then Ivan stated that, in his opinion, the princess was not the kind of person who would do such pranks. The emperor also confirmed these words, calling her stupid and asking her not to make him laugh. The father of the princess said that his daughter will not jump into the fountain to frame someone. And later he added that his daughter would not have done such a trifle with someone because she is a completely different person. Cyril stated that most likely she was going to frame his daughter and addressed her with the words of the sentence. Our heroine tried to stop her father, but he declared that Marian should be punished for insulting the heiress of the empire. Ice needles were already approaching her when she heard that she would have to answer for her deed with her life. The princess asked not to kill Marian, and at the moment when she screamed, her magic appeared and became a shield in front of the girl, saving her life. And the interesting thing is that the princess was able to stop the magical power of her father. Everyone was very surprised that our heroine managed to stop the ice magic itself, and also the one that came from the emperor, and Dea already calmly asked her father not to do this, because she is against murder. While everyone was silent and looked at our heroine, this princess did not understand what kind of atmosphere prevailed around her. The emperor immediately asked where she learned this magic and clarified that she meant a wall of ice, and Dea replied with confusion that maybe Faye did it. Then her friend replied that it was not him, but that she had manifested magical abilities.